This is Dharma Drops with your host, Rebecca Warfield. This podcast is a little bit about yoga, a little bit about life, and a little bit about whatever. And just as a warning, this podcast is unscripted, so that means I might regret a few things that I say. But hey, maybe I'll say some pretty awesome stuff too. Remember, these are musings, not truths. Buckle up, giddy up, because here we go. Okay, take 3. It's just me, guys, and I'm not used to talking by myself anymore. You know, my first 2 podcast episodes were just me talking because I had no idea what I was doing. But since then, I've just had guests on who do all the magic for me, and now it's just me, and I don't know what I'm doing. So we're going to try this for the 3rd time, but 3rd time's a charm, right? We're going to get it right. Hey, it's me, Rebecca Warfield, your host of Dharma Drops Podcast, Yoga, Life, What? Ever. And I'm here today all by my little lonesome to talk to you about one of my most beloved and most hated subjects in yoga, arm balances. I'll get to the arm balance stuff in a little bit, but first, can we just acknowledge that I really am here by myself and I feel a little bit lonely, and I kind of feel bad for you, the listener, because it is just me and there's no sweet guest on the other end. Like, you know, the episode with Logan, like she just has the sweetest little voice and she has the sweetest things to say, or the recent episode with Jackie, she's just as sweet as can be. And then I'm over here just breaking your speakers and taking it up a notch with my volume. But in any case, it is just me. I guess technically I'm not really alone. My French bulldog, Hank Meatball Warfield Fleischman III of Wilmington, he is here at my feet snoozing away. So you might hear a little bit of snores in the background, which just adds to the experience. I think, maybe I'm biased, but I think he's the cutest dog ever. So he's here with me too. But in any case, I am here to talk about arm balances, and this is in coordination with Long Wave Yoga because I am hosting an upcoming workshop this coming Saturday called the Unarm Balance Workshop. It's an arm balance workshop for people who don't do arm balances, which I don't really do arm balances. I'll tell you more about that later, but it is an arm balance workshop without arm balances. So sure, part of this podcast episode is for me to share that information with you. But the other part of it is to talk about arm balances because this is something that so many people want to nail and achieve in the yoga practice, and they work at it. And some people can just nail it and some people can't. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today, and why it's not really that big of a deal if you can't do arm balances. But if you are a local resident, if you live in Wilmington, North Carolina, or if you're vacationing at Wrightsville Beach or something like that, head over to longwaveyoga.com and you can sign up for the Unarm Balance workshop on the website. But even if you aren't local, if you live somewhere else and it's not feasible for you to get here, this podcast episode is also for you because it's not just about the workshop. It's really about the subject matter. And with that in mind too, I just want to give a little shout out to China and South Africa. What up? The 2 newest countries with downloads of Dharma Drops podcast. So if you live in China or you live in South Africa and you just so happen to be in Little Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, or Wilmington, North Carolina, come see me on Saturday. We won't do arm balances together in my arm balance workshop. But in any case, let's get on to the subject matter here. So again, I am not an arm balancing yogi. So if you've spent any time with me in a yoga class, or if you watch me practice at all, you will normally see me try arm balances, and then 9 times out of 10, I bail before I hit it, or I fall, or I get frustrated. And the frustrated part is the one that I'm constantly working with all of the time. If there is one thing that arrives in my yoga practice and often in my daily life on the reg, it is frustration. And arm balances, they generate so much freaking frustration in my body and in my mind and in my breath that that's not necessarily a bad thing. We'll get to that in a little bit. But just in terms of my experiences with arm balances, I really am not great at them. I don't know if anyone can be bad at arm balances because that's not really how yoga works. But if we're talking about people who can just stand on their hands and have a great time, that's not me. Many years ago, I went to an arm balance workshop. I think Addie Jo Bannerman taught it. So if you're listening, Addie Jo, hi. I'm pretty sure Addie Jo Bannerman taught the arm balance workshop. And I went. and I couldn't do a single arm balance. And this was pretty early on in my daily regular asana practice. I mean, I've practiced yoga off and on for many, many years, but it's really been within the last, 5 years or so, something like that I've had a daily regular yoga practice. And this was sort of at the beginning of my regular practice. I couldn't do a goddamn arm balance to save my life, and I lost my marbles. So I was so upset. I cried the entire workshop. Not because I was sad. The level of frustration that arrived in that workshop was beyond anything I think I had ever experienced before. And of course, I'm like too cool for school, so I can't like let anyone know that I cried. So I'm all like in child's pose, like, oh my God, my allergy is this. Oh my God, the grass pollen, it's just so bad. I can't breathe, making my eyes all teary. But really, I was actually crying because I was pissed. And what pissed me off even more is that Aaron, my boyfriend, he is sitting right next to me, mind you, at the time, had like never practiced yoga, just balancing on his hands, like there's nothing to it, doing all the arm balances. I mean, of course, I love Aaron dearly, but he just drives me nuts sometimes because he can get into these postures with such ease. Like one time we were in Rachel Taylor's vinyasa class, and she cued us to come into forearm stand, and Aaron's like, oh, cool, I've never done that before. Let me try it. Up he went. Here I am, years later, still can't get into forearm stand. So I remember feeling like mad at myself for not being able to get into it, frustrated that this like barrel-chested dude who doesn't do yoga can get into the arm balances, and I'm just chilling, like I can't do these things. So flash forward a few years later, and, here we are. I still can't really do arm balances, but what's really started to shift for me, and this is, of course, because of my yoga practice, is really the ability to control the thoughts that accompany the arm balances. So I think at the time, some of the mistakes that I was making in my yoga practice, and maybe they're not mistakes because I don't really like to think of the yoga practice this way as like we're doing things right or we're doing things wrong or it's a mistake. I think just where I was at in my life and in my thoughts and in my body at that time is I would try to like talk myself up, like, you have to do it. You have to do it. You're going to get into this goddamn Bakasana. You will be in that crow pose, Rebecca. And of course, that doesn't get me anywhere. Right? All that did was upset me the entire time and make it even more difficult for me to get into the arm balances. But a few years ago, I did have a bit of an epiphany about arm balances where I don't even know where it came from. If you practice yoga on the reg, you probably know that sometimes like this knowledge just arrives because that's actually part of the yoga practice, right? It's revealed to you with time. And it's not like necessarily someone tells you, just suddenly one day you're like, oh, duh. Got it, right? And that happened to me one day coming into Kundanyasana, which if you come to my arm balance workshop, we're going to be doing propped up on bolsters and blocks. But anyway, I was coming into Kundanyasana and I couldn't do it at the time. It's one of the only arm balances. It's one of two arm balances that I can do. Usually most days if I try, but at the time I couldn't get into it. And I started to run this whole dialogue of like, you're going to do this. You're going to fucking get into this arm balance, Becky. And then I was like, whoa. That doesn't work. Pressuring yourself to get into an arm balance doesn't work. So then I gave myself this whole dialogue. Okay, fine. You're just going to do whatever you want to do. You're just take it easy. But that didn't work either because then I felt like I was pressuring myself to like relax into the posture. So I made the decision in the moment. I'm not going to think about anything. Inhale, stretch my leg to the front of room. Exhale, bend my elbows, and I'll be damned. Right into Kundanyasana B I went. Couldn't believe it. And so that was a pretty important moment for me as a yogi to remind myself that, hey, this arm balance business, it's not about being an advanced practitioner because first of all, it's really important to remember, if you ask me, maybe you feel differently about it or maybe your yoga teachers feel differently about this, but I really truly believe, and it's important to remind myself that the advanced yoga practitioner is not one who can stand on his or her hands. It's not one who can float up into handstands. The advanced practitioner is not one on Instagram in these fancy postures that no one can get into. The advanced practitioner is the one who can sit with the breath, who can let go of the thoughts and be where they are in the moment and experience the benefits of that no matter what the shape of the posture looks like. And when I had that moment, I was like, this is it. these arm balance things, this is not about getting into the posture. It's experiencing the benefits of it. And I'll talk about the benefits of arm balances a little bit later because there are physical and mental benefits to arm balances, which we can talk about. But in any case, the advanced practitioner is one who can be in the posture no matter what it looks like and can back out when they know to back out and can move forward when they know to move forward. So to practice arm balances doesn't mean to put pressure on yourself. It doesn't mean to work as hard as you can to get into it. Sure, there's some effort that comes into arm balances, but the nature of the yoga practice is the balance of effort and ease. And if you want to get fancy with it, you can call it sthira and sukham. But if that's not your thing, effort and ease. And yes, it takes effort to be there, but it also takes ease. So it takes effort in the body. It takes ease in the mind. It takes effort in the mind and ease in the body to be in arm balances. And that's a really delicate dance. And so it isn't about getting into the posture. I believe more so, can you be in that delicate balance of effort and ease and be cool with that, no matter what that means for you? But there are some there's some finical benefits. There are some physical benefits to arm balances. Let's just sidebar for a second that I am by myself recording this podcast and I make mistakes and I still sing to myself. So let it be known that what you see is what you get and what you hear is what you get, that I'm just as ridiculous by myself, probably even more ridiculous by myself than I am with people in the room with me. But in any case, there are physical benefits to arm balances, but it's not the benefits, or the benefit doesn't arrive necessarily if you nail the arm balance. The benefits arrive as you practice them and honor where you are in the body right now. So there's a lot of different ways that we like to talk about arm balances. And so many people talk about needing core strength. And so many people talk about needing shoulder strength. And so many people talk about having side body strength and inner thigh strength and leg strength and all of this stuff. I'm here to tell you, not one of those is true. All of them are true, right? The asana practice, it does not matter what type of posture you're getting into. It is a full body experience. I don't care if you're standing on your hands. I don't care if you're standing on your feet. I don't care if you're balancing on your head. It is a full body experience. Yes, it is certainly true that if you lack core strength, maybe particular arm balances might be difficult. Or if you lack shoulder or arm strength, for example, some arm balances might be a little more difficult. But we can't, I don't like to say nothing's ever universal, but I don't like to think about arm balances just being arm and shoulder strength, or just being core strength, just being side body strength, or just being inner thigh strength, or whatever. It's a full body experience. And so what's really awesome about that is even the act of practicing an arm balance. Doesn't matter if you float, doesn't matter if you actually stand on the hands. The effort of practicing an arm balance integrates the whole body. So let's say you're trying to get in Bakasana, and let's say you can't come into Bakasana. Doesn't matter. Your feet are not going to come up. You're not even going to try to lift your feet. But can you learn to hug the upper arm bones in? Can you learn to use the chest? Can you learn to squeeze the inner thighs and lift up from your core? You might not be floating into Bakasana. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But you're using the whole body and you're experiencing what it's like to unite the mind and the body to find that full body integration. And that's what I also really like about arm balances, not just the whole part about like, hey, they can like work with the mind, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it allows us to really feel integrated in the whole body. And in, I think, a really specific sort of way, because often there's fear involved. And so we want to make sure, at least I do, like, okay, am I getting this right? Am I doing all these things? Because if I just so happen to float up, I don't want to fall, right? Not that I want to give into that fear, because part of arm balance is getting past the fear. But I do think that there's something to be said about arm balances and inversions too, where we really have to tune into the entire body to be in that experience. Look, I'm not saying things like Warrior 2 aren't hard, but it's one thing to be in Warrior 2 and kind of lose track of your thoughts or lose track of your breath for a second and then come back into it. You know, the outcome or the consequences of that is pretty minimal for the most part. I mean, of course, bodies can be injured and stuff like that, but most likely probably, if you forget to, let's say you forget to deepen the bend in your front knee in Warrior 2, you're most likely not going to fall and crack your face. You're probably not going to fall and crack your face in arm balances either, but you feel like you might. And so we get really tuned into the body. And this is freaking awesome if you ask me, because that's what arm balances were designed to do. They were designed to be a little frustrating, to be a little intense, to really build up the energy of the body and to integrate the entire body. And amongst all that, can you be in this moment? Can you get the whole body engaged? And can you just sit with that and be cool? I wrote down in my notes here, can you stay cool in the midst of the fire? When the mind starts to freak out, oh man, I'm about to fall. I have this narrative that I tell myself all the time, which I do believe is partially true, but it arrives into my practice when I don't want it to. So long story short, when I was a kid, I was sitting on the couch watching, I think, Naked Gun, which I probably shouldn't have been watching, but it was like the late 80s or 90s and no one really paid attention anyway, because that's just how things worked back then. And I hopped up off the couch, and the next thing I know, my dog was licking my face and my mom was screaming, and I had braces, and I was like, oh man, my mouth hurts. What is happening? I had passed out on the kitchen floor and I landed on my chin. And so of course my chin split open, and it was Father's Day. Sorry, Dad. It was Father's Day. And my dad was upstairs sleeping. My mom's screaming for my dad. He can't hear. Then he finally comes down. He's like, what? God damn it. What? I'm like bleeding everywhere. It was total chaos. Long story short, the chin bone was hanging out of my face. I got stitches. Everything was cool. But I've had a fear since then of hitting my chin because it's a little sensitive, even though we're talking like 20 some years later, it's a little sensitive. And so anyway, sometimes when I come into arm balances, especially the forward facing ones, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to hit my chin. It hurts. So sometimes the fear comes up in the arm balance practice, and that's what it's designed to do. Can you be in a moment of fear and let that fear wash away and come back to your breath, come back to the integration of your body? It does not mean that your feet will fly off the mat. It does not mean that you will get into the pose. I hope you do get into the arm balance, but that's not the point. The bigger message is, can you sit with it? Can you be integrated? Can you be whole? And can you breathe? Because look, I'm not putting myself on Instagram. You probably aren't going to put yourself on Instagram. If you do fancy yoga poses and put yourself on Instagram, that's awesome. But that doesn't teach us what the postures are really doing. They're teaching us to be cool in the middle of the fire, to be integrated when we start to feel chaos, to be still when we start to feel chaos. And that's pretty freaking awesome. So the good news is, if you're like me and you feel a lot of frustration and a lot of fear in arm balances, they're working. You're doing it right. So the next step is, what can you do with that? How can you take that back in? How can you come back to center? How can you come back to a place of integration? For me, often that means not lifting my feet, but really finding that effort in the body and just noticing my breath. So how can you sit with where you are? Again, the most advanced practitioner is not one who can float off the ground, who cannot do the fanciest poses. Sure, that stuff is advanced, it's fancy, and it takes a lot of strength and years of practice to develop that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't do a whole lot more for us. The people who are floating into fancy arm balances, they're probably not getting much more of a physical benefit than you are, right? So be where you are and enjoy that. So just to recap, the physical benefits is that it's an integrated whole body experience. And the mental benefit is that it allows us to be cool in the middle of the fire, to find that stillness in the storm. I really like this idea too. And I mean, I already talked about this a little bit, but I want to talk about it again, is that our arm balance practice, it gives our mind something to focus on. And that's really important when we're talking about the yoga practice, because advanced postures, what they do is they give us something to focus on. Sure, there are types of yoga where you do the same sequence and the same postures every day, but you move into new postures as you progress in those series and those sequences. And it's the same thing no matter what type of yoga you're practicing. If you do the same exact things every day and you never give yourself the opportunity to learn something new, eventually the mind gets bored. The human brain it wants to do stuff and it wants to think and it wants to experience and it wants to feel. And so when we give ourselves the opportunity to come into more, quote, advanced postures, what we're doing is we're giving our brain that stimulation to try something new. But the brain does a lot of crazy stuff and it'll tell you all kinds of crazy stories. My brain always tells me that I'm going to fall forward and hit my chin. Or my brain starts to tell me these stories of pressure, like you have to do this. Everyone else is doing it. Why can't you do it? Oh my God, you're a yoga teacher. Why can't you do these things, right? The brain always wants to do things. And so having arm balances in our yoga practice, it gives the brain an opportunity to do something, but it's also our work to do to let go of those other thoughts and come back to the body, to the breath, and to that experience in the moment. So that's just my 2 cents about the focal point of the mind. I like to think about it really as like a drishti, right? We talk about the drishti in the yoga practice as something that we look at, but in the arm balance practice, it doesn't matter if you're floating off the ground or not. Can you set that internal gaze to the moment, to the body, and to the breath? And then maybe you'll get into the pose and maybe you won't. Who cares? Either way, it's just yoga. It's supposed to be fun. I used to let my yoga practice get the best of me, and sometimes it still does. Just the other day, I was in Lexi's class. What up, Lexi? And she was doing partner handstands, and I'll be damned, I was feeling so frustrated in that class because I was scared because it's scary to be on your hands upside down. I mean, I don't know how to classify myself as a yogi, but if I'm looking or using my own definition, I'd classify myself as an advanced practitioner. And even then, this was just last week. It was last Thursday. Even then I was like, oh, this is so frustrating. And even Shavasana, I was like, I'm going home. I'm going to nail this stupid handstand. I'm going to ask Aaron to help me and I'm going to do it. And the next time I'm going to be the best at it, which is like not what I need to be doing. So I'm not saying that this is just something that it's like, oh, now I'm not going to care. Now I'm just going to be with the body. And now I'm just going to be with the breath. It's going to be a practice. It's a practice for all of us. And sometimes I think for me, the more advanced I get physically in my yoga practice, the harder that is. So it's not something that's going to be easy, but it's a practice and it teaches us so much about our lives too. And that's the other really critical component to arm balances. It's not about the damn arm balance. It's not about any of it. It's about how we respond to the frustrations and the intensity of our lives. The arm balances, they're just a small example of things that might piss us off in our regular lives or that might frustrate us or things that we feel like we can't achieve. The way we respond to those arm balances, most likely, I mean, I don't know what's going through your head all the time, but most likely the way we respond to things in our yoga practice is the way we respond to things in life all the time anyway. And I can only speak for myself, but the feelings of frustration that I get in the arm balance practice is the same frustration that I get when I'm off my yoga mat and things start to get on my nerves or I feel like I can't achieve something. So learning how to stay cool in my arm balance practice has really started to help me in my regular life. Cool. So this isn't working out in my regular life. Let me see how I can figure it out. Does it actually need to be done this way? Can I do this task, whatever it is that's making me annoyed right now, making me feel frustrated? Can I do this in a different way that allows me to achieve the same goal? So it's same, and that's really cool. What we experience on our yoga mats is really just what we experience in our lives. But whether or not we get into arm balances, as I've said about, 6,000 times now, doesn't matter. It's can we really enjoy and appreciate the experience of trying them? And so that's one of the things that I want to do in the workshop and what I've been incorporating into my own life is how can I practice arm balances in a way that serves me? So again, in the workshop, if you're local, you can learn this if you come to the event. But if you're not local, then it's things you can practice at home too. How can you prop yourself up with props? So that way you don't have to worry about falling. So for example, if you're coming into crow pose, Bakasana, if maybe you're new to yoga, that is the one where like your knees are on the upper outer arms and you're kind of crouched down on your hands. It's kind of hard to explain actually. And you're balancing on your hands and your feet come up towards your butt. Maybe I'll post a picture, not of me doing it, but as someone who can, because I can't do crow pose, or I'll post a picture of me using props. That's what I'm going to do. But let's say you're coming into crow pose and you're just like feeling like, man, I just don't know how to lift my feet. Put something under your forehead. Put your forehead on that thing, the block, bolster, a stack of blankets, whatever it is, and lift your feet up. See what it feels like to lift your feet up. right? Give yourself the opportunity to try the arm balances. Just because you can't do them on your own right now in your yoga practice doesn't mean you don't deserve to try. It doesn't mean you don't deserve to experience the benefits of them. Can you prop yourself up? Like, say, for example, you wanted to come into Basana, sit in a chair, put your hands on the chair and lift your butt up and see what it feels like to be in the pose that way. So get creative with how you get into your yoga postures. If you're coming to the workshop, you're going to learn some ways to do that. If you live out of town or if you're out of the country and you're not sure and you can't come to the workshop, you can either message me on Instagram at Rebecca Warfield Yoga, or you can Google things. There's amazing information out there about how to get into arm balances without actually having to do arm balances, because just if you can't do them doesn't mean you don't deserve the benefits and the experiences of trying to do them, because it's the trying that is the most important part. The other thing is, even if you don't have props or you don't want to work with props for some reason, no problem. But can you be where you are and be okay with that? Can you try your arm balances every single day? And even if you don't get into it in 5 years, can you be okay with that? That's the big question. I've been trying Bakasana now for, I guess, almost every single day for the last 5 years. Hasn't happened yet. It used to upset me and I used to feel really embarrassed about it. But look, now it's just where my practice is and I'm kind of excited about that. Maybe it'll arrive one day, maybe it won't. It's just yoga. It doesn't matter. That's the cool part about yoga. It doesn't matter. What matters, can you learn from the experience? Okay, so that's just my 2 cents about arm balances. And here's the deal. If you want to ask me how I feel about inversions, listen to this podcast. And every time I say arm balance, insert the word inversion. Or if you want to talk about this for any other family of asana, insert it there. Because this whole thing, everything I'm saying, it's really true for the entire asana experience. Arm balances are just unique in that we bring a lot of things to the arm balance practice. I'm sure there's some people out there who don't have these fears and who can come right into them. But for a lot of people, there's a lot of stuff that arrives. A lot of stuff comes up. The muck, right, comes up when we come into arm balances or any other family of asana for that matter. I do hear a lot of people talk about sort of similar things when it comes to like heart opening or back extensions. The asana practice, it helps us move through the muck, kind of like the lotus, right? It teaches us all these things about ourselves, our thoughts, our fears, our feelings. And then we arrive in this place where suddenly, hopefully, we understand. Maybe it's about arm balances, maybe it's about back extensions or inversions. You insert the family of asana of your choice. But for me, it's always an arm balances. And I think for a lot of people too, I tend to meet a lot of people who are like, I don't know about those arm balance things. They're kind of freaky, but they don't have to be, I promise. Okay. If you want to come to the workshop, head over to longwaveyoga.com and you can sign up for the workshop there. It is this Saturday, June 15th, 2019. Probably, if you're listening to this right now, you're like, yeah, duh, 2019, but podcasts last forever. So someone might be listening to this in like, I don't know, 5 years or something. So 2019, but hey, everything I'm saying right now is still going to be true in 5 years. And I think 500 too, right? I mean, I don't know. Who knows how things will change, but I feel like yoga is pretty timeless. So it's probably going to be true in 5 years too. We'll see. But anyway, it's Saturday, June 15th, 2019 from 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. And for those of you who don't live locally, I'm sorry you can't be there, but maybe you should come visit us sometime in Wilmington, North Carolina. We have a great beach. You can hang out. You can get a tan. You can eat good food. And then you can come to Long Wave Yoga and do yoga with us. The last thing before I part ways, and this has nothing to do with arm balances, but I do want to note that a lot of the guests on Dharma Drops are Long Wave Yoga teachers. So if you want to learn a little bit more about them, you can visit longwaveyoga.com and check out their bios. And you can also listen to their podcast episodes because they have really cool things to say. It's a lucky community that we have at Long Wave, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. It's such an honor to be there. I hope to see you at the workshop. I hope you practice arm balances. If you can't get into arm balances, I hope that you are A-OK with that. And until we meet again next time, I'll see you later. Thanks so much for listening to this special episode of Dharma Drops. Remember, these are musings, not truths. I hope you can trust everything that I say. I speak from my heart, but this is an unscripted podcast, so sometimes I'm just saying shit, man. So remember, musings, not truths. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Dharma Drops Podcast on whatever app you're listening to this podcast on. The more you rate, the more you review and subscribe, the more together we can share all the awesome guests and information on Dharma Drops with the rest of the world. It's so exciting. If you'd like to follow my shenanigans on Instagram, head over to @RebeccaWarfield and at Dharma Drops Podcast. And of course, head to longwaveyoga.com and follow Longwave on Instagram at Longwave Yoga. It's amazing, an amazing community of people. They're doing incredible work in the yoga world. Please check them out, give them some love. And until we meet again next time, friends, bye.